The single-panel comic is a limited type of artwork. It challenges the artist to tell an often comedic, visually simple, and clear story within the boundary of a single, still frame, save for the caption at the bottom. When done well, this profound limitation can result in profound efficiency, and The Far Side is one of the most tightly crafted and most revered comics to ever run. It is also one of the most surreal. One cartoon features a woman explaining how she embedded her husband in concrete in the middle of their living room. Another illustrates a safari team driving through a wildlife preserve filled with exotic animals trapped in enormous glass jars. A factory filled with chickens produces deflated rubber men. Men and women in glasses peek out of prairie dog holes. These cartoons beg the question, was The Far Side always this bizarre? Well, yes. Yes, it was. Before being called The Far Side, it was called Nature's Way, with a focus on making fun of and subverting the expectations of nature. Gary Larson was influenced by publications like Mad Magazine and Gay Ann Wilson, a regular Playboy, National Lampoon, and the New Yorker comic artist who dealt with the dark and surreal. Before Mad and Wilson, there was the gag cartoon. Some of these old gag cartoons are so effective and timeless, they look like they could come out today. Nature's Way primarily employed the animal kingdom, but even this wide subject matter would prove to be too narrow for Gary Larson's imagination. After a name change and syndication by Chronicle Features, it became The Far Side. Anyone who's read The Far Side will pick up on its common themes. Role reversal, where humans act like animals and animals act like humans. The supernatural. The prehistoric. The extraterrestrial. Nearly everyone in The Far Side is fat. Every human is a mound of dough with a pill-shaped head. In fact, everything in the comic looks obese and ridiculous. From animals to cars to planes. Even the waves illustrated here more resemble rolls of fat. Gary Larson could be very particular about the details in his comics. For example, when he didn't quite think the animals were appropriate in this cartoon, he switched them to bears, since they can walk on their hind feet and more resemble a group of guys standing around. The timing of the scene matters too. In the sketch version of this joke about a sheep getting sheared right before a date, it shows what the sheep is thinking during the shearing. However, in the final version, Larson moved forward in time and showed the aftermath of the shearing. Many of his jokes revolve around taking a snapshot of just before or just after a significant event, either building tension or making you wonder about what led up to whatever absurd thing just occurred. Sometimes the pose of one character matters a great deal, like in this cartoon where horses are introduced to America and one horse points to the scenery like a tourist. Larson felt this expression made the cartoon, and couldn't be changed like the poses of the others could be. In one case, the syndicate removed the last two letters of this caption, horrifying Larson, since he believed turning yee-haw into yee could confuse readers into thinking the people are yelling this, not the aliens, prompting him to request a correction. Some cartoons don't always hit the mark, like this one of a therapist speaking to a single angry eye, which I at first thought belonged to the couch itself come to life. But this detail didn't quite survive size reduction when printed. There is a sense of misanthropy in these comics, or at least a perspective where humans and animals are on equal footing. Animals will be concerned with the trivialities of domestic life. Human delinquents will be put in a zoo for display, complete with cave. Even the presumably brightest minds humanity has to offer frequently engage in childish behavior. Some comics can be weirdly poignant, even critical of humans' relationship with nature. On the other hand, humans and animals can be shown to live in shocking harmony. What is most consistent, however, is Larson's use of the surreal, his ability to turn any everyday situation on its head. Larson's most infamous cartoon has to be Cow Tools, a drawing of a cow in front of a table filled with various unidentifiable tools, except for one that is vaguely shaped like a handsaw. Larson said of this cartoon, "A week after it was published back in 1982, I wanted to crawl into a hole somewhere and die," because he received so many distress messages from people asking what on earth it meant. But the key is there is no key. The cow tools don't mean anything because we humans don't know what cow tools would do or why cows would need them. The cartoon simply imagines a world in which cows develop tools just like humans did. There's something delightfully nonsensical about this comic. You wonder what the two-pronged hoe thing is for, or what these half-spheres with weird protrusions do. Like trying to connect Rene Magritte's titles to his paintings, it's a stimulating exercise in trying to find meaning where there is none. Heathcliff may at first look like a knockoff Garfield, but in many ways he's his own distinct creation. Heathcliff doesn't talk. He's much more of a menace, and the strip was started by George Gately in 1973, 5 years before the debut of Garfield. For more than 2 decades, the jokes in Heathcliff relied on Heathcliff misbehaving and indulging in antics. Each comic contained a simple, understandable gag. But when Gately and his partner John Gallagher aged out of producing the strip, it was taken over by Peter Gallagher, after apprenticing under his uncles for 5 years. After Peter assumed creative control, the humor gradually became more strange and cryptic. Let me show you a modern Heathcliff comic. Don't get it? Think about it for a second. Well, a cat is in a deli shop, that's a bit strange, but not funny on its own. He's wearing a helmet with the word ham on it. Is the helmet made of ham? Does the helmet signify what he's thinking about? Is ham something he wants? The man at the counter says, "I'd order the turkey." Therefore, Heathcliff must in some way be punishing those who order ham? It could be that. It could also be nonsense.
A lot of people with the helmets, they're like, well, what is it? The helmets are something he wants? And I'm like, I don't know, I just do what if something funny could be on the helmet, I like doing that. I don't know, it could be something.
He's wearing a helmet.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the explanation, right?
Right.
Sometimes a helmet is just a helmet.
That's right. Yeah.
If you believe there is some secret meaning, feel free to tell me. But when I first saw some of these modern Heathcliff comics, I thought they were made by an artist who had drawn comics for so long that they had completely lost their mind. The ham thing doesn't come from nothing. There are actually many recurring themes in the comic that can go back years. Ham, dirt, beef, meat, helmets, they all have a history. Take the garbage ape, for example. It started out in 2008 as a joke on the ridiculousness of the Easter Bunny, but the garbage ape continued to make appearance after appearance, bringing unwavering joy to the cats of Heathcliff. The official description for the garbage ape is, "The mysterious garbage ape comes at night to bring delicious garbage, much to the delight of hungry Heathcliff and his pals. He has never been seen by humans. Is he real?" Jimmy is another recurring character, a small, green, blank-faced frog that Heathcliff constantly tries to promote, but the popularity of Jimmy events is always inexplicably low. So why did Peter Gallagher take it in this direction? When apprenticing under his uncles, they once told him, "Look, Heathcliff's been around for a long time. What you're going to do is ideas that we've already done. That's the first thing that's going to happen. We've done so many ideas about a cat cartoon that you're going to repeat, and so we can't use those." The need for innovation was apparent. In another episode, Peter Gallagher explained, "I would bring them a group of gags. They would go through them and tell me, 'All right, not this one.' And I was like, 'Oh, I thought you would think this one's really funny.' And they're like, 'Don't do what you think we think is funny. You should do what you think is funny.' And so he did." Sometimes this would result in a theme week, where a set of comics would be made for that week that would all have the same theme. A young woman once told Gallagher, "When you did Dirt Week, my boyfriend called me. He's like, 'I can't believe it. I think it's on. I think it's gonna be Dirt Week.'" With Heathcliff, you don't think about a setup or a punchline. You think about a comical story. You think about how this world operates and how things got to be the way they are. It's unpredictable because some of these comics make perfect sense. Some may require background knowledge, and others are completely indecipherable. It's remarkably like The Far Side, especially Cow Tools, though more reliant on inside jokes and recurring characters. There's also a delight in the strangeness of it all. This Heathcliff cat tree tower thing could fit right in a De Chirico painting. Heathcliff isn't that obscure of a property. It had its own animated series. Successful newspaper comics can be run for so long that they become zombie versions of themselves, where they repurpose old comics again and again with slight changes to keep up with the times, without ever really evolving. But Heathcliff has avoided this fate by kind of turning into a different comic. I wouldn't call myself a Heathhead, but I admire this adaptation instead of stagnation. I think my favorite modern-day single-panel comic has to be Pants. Josh McCouch's cartoon series constantly features these old, small-faced men and tiny gremlins that look like cuter versions of Stephen Gamble creatures. All the line work is scraggly and uneven, and the writing for these comics is nothing short of genius. It's hard to explain why I find all of these hilarious. I think Josh McCouch just has an intuitive sense of what works in this world and how to structure jokes according to its weird rules. Take this comic, for example. What really makes it work to me is the teapot's demoralized face. Or with this one, the power stance of the man just completes it. Or with this comic, details such as the custom sign and the hesitant look of the soup holder really tie everything together and make you wonder about the events that led up to this point. Or you have comics that focus in on the mundane with no obvious punchline, but still function perfectly off the strangeness of the art style. He's even able to use color to highlight the focus of a joke. Pants, of course, has its own set of recurring themes, like butts, spanking, tiny cowboys, hooves, painting and drawing. Toilets, fairies, and groups of people with the same interest or accessory. There are plenty of cartoons in the series that have more traditionally funny gags, but I think a lot of the qualities of this comic come from the universe McCouch has created. The element of surprise is a fundamental of comedy, and a fundamental of surrealism. Once you have a setup, by switching the expected reveal with an unexpected one that still makes some sense, you achieve that mind-blown feeling that ideally results in laughter or contemplation. That's my theory for why a lot of Sunday funnies just aren't funny. You see the traditional comic art style, you see it's two kids or some family members talking, and you know the punchline is going to be some kind of schlock. You know that no matter what, Garfield is going to be lazy and gluttonous. Odie is going to be abused by Garfield. John Arbuckle is going to be a lame dweeb, and you know all the punchlines are going to be based off these unchanging characteristics. These same jokes have been told so many times that even the subversions of these characteristics have been played out. Worse, these jokes are always told in the same standard, boring way. These kinds of comics are fine if you want to be charmed by these characters doing what they do in your Sunday newspaper, but they aren't surprising. Their humor is limited. With The Far Side, Modern Heathcliff, and Pants, you don't know what's going to happen. The Far Side will always hit you with some kind of absurd scenario, and if the scenario isn't absurd, you know you're going to be hit with an unexpected caption. When a newspaper screwed up and switched the captions of a Far Side and a Dennis the Menace comic, I found the humor of the Dennis the Menace comic to be much improved, if not, at least a little more interesting. In fact, I was so inspired by this that, with some help from Fudo, I created a website that would randomly take comics from one series and switch the bottom caption with that of another, or just switch captions at random. Introducing the Comic Caption Swapper. It is purely a tool that switches captions at random, so 90% of the new comics will be nonsense. But for what it's worth, I think these are pretty amusing. Some of them are oddly depressing. If you want to play with it before someone takes it down for copyright, you can. Just click the link below or go to comicswap.art. It also works on mobile. You can screenshot any funny ones you find and send them to me on Discord, Twitter, or Polycentric if you're worried about copyright. This would be a good time to mention I was once inspired by The Far Side and made my own comics in middle school. This one I think is the best. Anyway, across 50 years of Heathcliff's run, its art style has remained remarkably consistent. Modern Heathcliff maintains this typical comic art style but hits you with a type of humor that is not usually associated with that style. The style leads you to believe you're going to get an obvious, probably dated and corny joke, but then you read the caption, and you're slapped in the face with, "He's going way over the ham limit." The surprise is you think it's going to make sense. Like there's going to be some kind of ham-based pun, but the caption is only an extra piece of information which does nothing to clarify the joke. It's like an anti-comic. Pants's jokes don't have to be insanely genius, though they are. The way he draws the characters and the situations these characters find themselves in are strange enough on their own to warrant being surprised. And of course, details matter. Being strange on its own isn't enough, lest you fall into the trap of random therefore funny. Execution matters just as much. Pants is filled with storytelling details. Gary Larson would agonize over things like timing, the pose of a single character, and the exact wording of a caption in order to best deliver the joke. Heathcliff, I think, can lean a bit too much into being random without substance on occasion, but there's still plenty of well-executed jokes in the series, as well as meta-cartoons that build on previous jokes. Peter Gallagher also emphasizes again and again that he does not want to spoil any reoccurring jokes by indulging in them too many times. To be surprising is to figure out how to deal with the ravages of time. You have to know when a joke or even a series has run its course. The Far Side ended when Gary Larson felt it should have ended. Heathcliff has evolved. Pants has just begun. During this time, each of these comics have built their own universes, complete with common rules and recurring subjects, yet are still able to lend themselves to the unexpected. These artists have not only crafted a place where a style can be built, but also a familiar landscape where the same idea can be riffed on in multiple ways, but never overplayed. All great artists had common themes they returned to again and again. Even the endlessly creative surrealist Rene Magritte frequently returned to mirrors, apples, partially cloudy blue skies, stone objects, and windows, but remixed them in novel ways. It can be immensely difficult to come up with a brand new idea every day, so it helps a lot if you have some common themes to bank on. When your world gets too crazy, it helps to know you can always put on a helmet. You may not know that before making The Far Side his full-time job, Gary Larson worked for some time as an investigator for his local humane society. This interest in animals certainly contributed to the focus of animals in his comics, which featured tall chickens, domestic cows, and other farmyard shenanigans. Unfortunately, in real life, farm animals are not equal to humans, which is why we must try our best to fight for them. I'm happy to say this video is not sponsored by FarmKind. Over 99% of farmed animals in the US are raised on factory farms, and the vast majority of people, about 75%, say that they oppose the conditions on these farms. But maybe, like me, you aren't sure what you're able to do about it. How do you know what makes a difference for farmed animals? What organizations can you support that actually fix factory farming? That's where FarmKind can help. One of the biggest impacts we can have for farmed animals is supporting the most effective charities with a small monthly donation. FarmKind works with experts to research and vet charities that help protect factory farmed animals. They dig into charities' track records and how many animals they can help with each dollar given. Based on that, FarmKind recommends a balanced portfolio of charities to give to. This means you can trust that your donation is actually helping. They have this tool that shows you exactly how many animals your donation can help. For example, donating just $15 a month can help almost 400 animals in a year. They also have an extra tool you can play around with, the Compassion Calculator. The Compassion Calculator works like carbon offsetting but for animal welfare. Input your diet, see your personalized monthly donation amount, and donate in a few clicks. FarmKind doesn't take a cut of your donation. It all goes to some of the most effective charities helping farm animals. Organizations that have freed millions of animals from cages and painful procedures without anesthetic, and are developing the food technologies that are reducing our dependence on factory farming. If you want to donate, the link is in the description. If you use the code SOLARSANDS when giving, your donation will get a 50% match, helping even more animals. Reminder, this is not a sponsorship, and I receive no money from FarmKind for advertising their charity or using this code. This is quite important to me. Thank you.